that was the biggest like break for me that I'd had in a way for my own career, just to be like, I'm producing a series that's gonna go to TV that's never been done before.
How did you go from an independent filmmaker to Fox creative and production executive?
That story starts on Craigslist, actually. When I first moved to Los Angeles, I was applying for lots of jobs and didn't know anybody. A lot of those jobs I would apply for on Craigslist, and one of them was actually for an editor at Fox, but didn't say where it was from. That was a surprise to me when they wrote back. Anyway, I ended up working for them as an editor for 4 years, I think. And that was when I was talking earlier about how I worked as an editor, but then I also was like, who's doing the post and managing all of that? And then I sort of was like, oh, I'm going to do it. And nobody ever told me not to. And I, once I did it once, and it turned out great. We hit our deliveries and everything came out on budget, and it looked great for, very little money, let's say. We would do it again and do it again and do it again. And that went on for about 4 years, on and off, of course. And I went and did my Euro backpacking trip, because I was like, like I said, I was working like just too much and I needed a break. And when I got back, I took a job for DirecTV and cutting promos and producing and directing some of them as well, which then was bought by AT&T. And around that time, my former boss at Fox that I did a lot of editorial for, he basically took me to dinner one day and was like, hey, I think I have an opportunity for you if you'd be interested. He had known about all my travels and things like that, and was also a huge soccer fan. And then he kind of basically presented the project Phenoms, and that was how I got involved there doing as a production executive. And really it was mostly post-production as well, because we had to design and create an entire infrastructure for something that hadn't really been done. I mean, that series was shot in 20 countries for almost 3 years. And it was up to me basically to figure out how to manage the post-production for that entire project that had, it was a 20 episode series, but 5 of them were in the US and 15 international episodes also, and coordinating with all the production teams internationally. And it was just a massive project. And I like to think that I did a good enough job on the projects that I had worked with him on previously, where I sort of took over the post-production on things that I was just editing, is what sort of gave him the faith in my ability to be able to handle that. And it was very stressful because I had never done something like that big before. But I also, had a great team and was able to collaborate and work together with a bunch of other producers to make all that stuff happen. So, but that opportunity came about because of a relationship and doing a good job, I like to think, previously.
And so when he asked you to be a part of it, was there something in you later on that night that said, ooh, why did I say yes to this? Because you said it would seem stressful, but then
No, it was more like, holy shit. I mean, excuse my French, but like, because, it wasn't like I just started the next day. I mean, there was a process to get like everything up and running, and it didn't just happen overnight, but it was definitely an opportunity that I like absolutely couldn't say no to. I mean, that series was broadcast on Fox and Fox Sports and in like many international markets as well. That was the biggest like break for me that I'd had in a way for my own career, just to be like, I'm producing a series that's gonna go to TV that's never been done before. And it also made the editorial very difficult because it was also my first time really doing documentaries. And, you don't have a script, but you still have air dates, and you still got to back into those air dates and make episodes that have stories to create. And with all that material from all over the world, it was just a very big project. But I also didn't want to just manage the post-production, I also really was like, this thing is super cool. Like, I loved it. So I wanted to edit an episode. And so that was partially why it was as stressful as it was for me, because I was handling a lot at once. And I didn't, maybe stupidly, I just was like, I need to play with the creative of this way more in the weeds than than anybody asked me to do. Nobody asked me to do that. That was for me, like, if I'm going to put this all together and really make all these pieces happen, and I got to get in there a little bit too. And so that was maybe something that I won't ever do again, just because it was way too demanding. But I'm glad I did it also once. It's one of those. I think I had the stamina at the time to handle it, but I don't think I could do it again like that. Exactly. It was really intense.
Like running with the bulls.
Yeah, it was like that. It was very different, but it definitely felt at times like the whole thing. I don't know. I mean, like, there's so many pieces to that puzzle that if in post production, it like always gets affected, but you still like it. So it was my responsibility to get those episodes to air on time. So yeah, like, needless to say, to me, I was like, this is my personal responsibility, and if I mess up, I'm doomed forever. You know what I mean? That's how I kind of thought about it. But again, it's like I wasn't alone. I had many really talented editors and other producers and helping make all this stuff happen. And so it wasn't like all on me, but I still put that pressure on myself. You know what I'm saying? That's maybe just something that I just do innately, because I'm like protective and my like heart and is in the project. And that's, when I said before, like, I can get sometimes obsessive about stuff. That's part of what I mean is, like, I'm like, this is the biggest thing I've ever done. I have no idea, this is the only thing that matters. And that you have to talk yourself back from that a little bit and be like, no, we're not curing cancer, but it still doesn't matter. And it's still very important. So it's just a balance that I learned a lot from doing that, and what I do and don't want to do again going forward. But it was an amazing opportunity, and I'm really glad that I had it, actually.
So when you flew back from St. Petersburg, Russia, so you went to go see the game?
Yeah, I went. So yeah, after I delivered all those episodes, I went to Russia for the World Cup for 2 or 3 weeks, basically. I went to St. Petersburg and Moscow, and we also had a production team shooting during those years for the series. So I also got to meet. I mean, it was a really fantastic way to kind of cap that 3-year journey.
What was the flight like back home?
I was kind of ready to be home by that point, but I have to say that anytime I come back from a vacation, especially one that's international, I do have like a little period of like depression that I have to like get out of. It happens every time, honestly. It's just something I'm like used to now. It's like, you had this amazing experience, but then like, you need to kind of rest, but you don't want to, but you don't know what you're doing now. It's like very, like that little just uncertainty period after you get back, and you're like, what did it all mean? And, it's just part of how I have to handle it myself. I don't know if that's the same for everybody, but definitely happens to me.
Can you explain more about the work that you did on Phenoms?
So as I mentioned, that series was shot in 20 countries, and we basically were following 65 of the young up-and-coming stars who are trying to make their national teams for the World Cup in Russia. And so we had, I think, 6, maybe 8 production teams internationally shooting with all those players. And then in Los Angeles, we had our basically global series kind of team, which included my entire office. And eventually, I think at one point we may have had like 30 editors on this project, including assistant editors and then an entire archive team for licensing the material that we were using as editors. It was a long road though, because we didn't actually start like the real production on what the series would become at the like it didn't just start that way. A lot of it was, as a documentary, you're sort of like the story has to kind of unfold in front of you. I mean, we had a guide by utilizing the World Cup and sort of what the goal was. But those players had to tell their stories. They had to either succeed or fail. And then those things would have to be captured on camera or at least in interviews for us to all find how best to tell those parts of their stories. And keep in mind, there's also language barriers and or many languages, not barriers, but many languages that we're also editing in. So putting that all together was a road of, I mean, some of it was design, some of it was exploratory, basically. And it was about 6 months before we were the show was to air, and that was where we began the episodic nature of the series. We basically were just kind of cutting material for a year up to that point, just refining it down. Like, so, 8 terabytes would come in from Russia and France, and then that would get subtitled when necessary, and then logged by the AEs, and then sent over to the editorial team, which ended up expanding into another office because we ran out of space. And then we had to also kind of keep in mind that all that material had to go from each location and always be synced. So a lot of technical stuff that I'm not sure how much of that is really valuable to this audience, but it was definitely complicated. It was very technical, but at the end of the day, it was really just about finding the story. That was the pursuit, and the best way that we found to do that was to be editing constantly, even if we didn't know it was going to be part of the episode or not, because we had to figure out what was in the material first. And so it was kind of like draft one, you could say, of like a script where it's your vomit draft. It's kind of, if you think about it that way. And then the episodes happened, and we also had ancillary content that was getting created for Fox Sports out of all that material, as well as deliveries. And then I was also editing an episode as well. I edited the Goalkeepers episode of the series, and which still is one of my favorite things I've ever done. Honestly, I'm really proud of how it turned out, and I didn't actually get a whole lot of notes and things like that. Like I felt like I had like sort of cracked something, and to a point where I kind of got left alone a little bit more than I was used to, which was excellent for me. But also kind of like, well, what do you think about this? Like, come on, guys, tell me. Like, I mean, there were so many other things going on at the time that were, logistic. Like my post coordinator, like, did a fantastic job. I mean, like a lot of those people that came in really, really brought everything together to make that show happen. I mean, it doesn't happen. And it was such a post-heavy project too that I'm very glad that my boss at the time, trusted me to do it. But if you had asked me in the beginning would I have known that we were going to be able to pull it off, I wouldn't have been able to tell you honestly. But I would have said yes, because why not? I mean, like, we have to figure it out together, and that's part of the process. So it's also money related and so many other things too.
Well, and you had these air date deadlines that you were fighting against too.
Yes, yeah. We knew exactly when they were going to air, probably like 6 months out, I think, which was basically the 3 Fridays leading up to the World Cup. The one thing that really hurt that series, at least in my opinion, was the fact that the U.S. didn't make the World Cup, and that was just something that none of us could have expected. I mean, I think that it was like 12 years since the U.S. hadn't made the World Cup by that point, so it was a big surprise to all of us, and really I remember that there was probably like a 2-week period in there where we were really like a little worried about what that meant for the series, at least in the U.S. I guess that episode though that covers the U.S. disqualification is fantastic. It was cut by a good friend of mine, and it's devastating to watch it, like, because it was so much a part of at least our culture. I don't know about the entire country, because I think it was like, you know, it wasn't as big of a deal as if we were in it, of course. But I'm a huge fan of the game, and so it was very much a big, like, passion project for me, that I had a lot of people that were also like huge fans involved in the project. I mean, that's the only reason it even got made, is because people love that game.
And sorry, why was the U.S. disqualified?
Oh, they just didn't win. They didn't.
Oh,
They didn't make. They didn't.
Okay.
They didn't qualify for the World Cup.
I see. Okay.
So they were disqualified in that sense.
So there was no scandal. It was just that.
No. Yeah,
okay,
they just didn't play well enough, and so it was a devastating result.